It doesn't always have to be like this, right? How do we have our needs met? How do we have our identities validated and our safety prioritized, and like our little essence and our beings like encouraged to like grow and flourish into whatever we want?
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today on a discussion about what needs to be normalized in relationships. I am here with Brianna, and this is actually our first time being face to face. We know each other through the internet. yeah. So you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. And if there's anything that I don't touch on, feel free to ask. If I'm like not comfortable, I'll let you know. But I'm pretty comfortable with both things. My name's Brianna. And like you mentioned, I recently just got my license in marriage and family therapy. So I'm still relatively like a baby therapist, but yes, big accomplishment. Thank you, thank you. And I would say that I have, as far as like how long I've been interested in psychology, I'd say like, yeah, middle school, probably
Yeah.
even elementary school, like very early awareness with like being raised in a trauma environment of like, this might not be how it's supposed to be. And like,
What's going on here?
yeah. And so, yeah, my family, not my immediate family, but my, Latinos, we call like our cousins and our tias, like they're still within in our close circle. So we had a loss. My cousin, she died when I was 7. She was 14 from cancer. And so her family was kind of the first to explore like what is a therapist, like what is sitting down with somebody and talking about like what's happening in our lives. And it was really powerful for them. And there was always this like, how do I get there? What helped you guys stabilize and kind of transcend some of these patterns that we've all been like normalized in? So I think we come from the same school district. I don't know if our middle schools and high schools did not have any electives on psychology or anything like that, but there's, subcultures of healing within our culture. And yeah, I knew when I was going into college, it was going to be some type of, whether it was counselor, psychologist, like something in that realm. And then I had a mentor, fantastic woman. Her name is Dr. Sarah Khan. She runs the counseling and social change minor, represent at state. It's a great minor. I'm like, anybody, regardless of your major, join it because it just really helps you kind of explore like unlearning and questioning like, why is this our like reality, and like where do these norms come from, and can we challenge and unlearn, and just really deconstructing like the dominant discourses out there of like how things should be or whatever. And so a lot of folks teaching those classes were MFTs, and I was like, what is this? I don't know what an MFT is. And then yeah, she's actually one of the professors in the master's program that I completed at state too. So it just like it gelled together. And yeah, that's me, I guess.
That's cool. So you knew straight up that you wanted to go into the psychology field?
Yeah, I think so. Like there was always this idea of like, okay, how do I become a helper? And I think initially a helper to me, like as a young child, was like my safe teachers at school. Like that was a safe haven for me. And so it was like, oh, I'm going to be this nurturing teacher. And then like, and if it wasn't teacher, it was like, okay, boys and girls, like coach, athletic, like just some kind of figure that has access to youth where you can create a safe space of like, this can be the exception. It doesn't always have to be like this, right? How do we have our needs met? How do we have our identities validated and our safety prioritized, and like our little essence and our beings like encouraged to like grow and flourish into whatever we want? But it was like, okay, some field of unlearning the like shame or violence or whatever it is that we were steeped in. So maybe the word wasn't psychologist in the 6th grade, but by the time middle school rolled around and I like met counselors and therapists in like presentations in class, I was like, that sounds more it. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, I definitely feel lucky because I work with a lot of everybody, but predominantly it had been youth and like transitional age youth and young adults. And so it's not uncommon for people to come and being super stressed about school and like anxiety about the future and like what am I going to do and academics and grades and career wise. So I'm always just like blessing and a curse that trauma informed my path of being a helper and kind of just knew that's the route that it was going to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, counseling. You are in counseling, my friend.
No. I'm in accounting, which is like.
Oh, accounting.
But it's funny. I actually wrote my, what is it when you're applying to your master's program? I've written, a letter of intent or whatever it's called for a master's program at. I was gonna apply to state, but I did it for another some school here in San Diego. It was too expensive, so I didn't do it. But it's definitely been something that like I just naturally do. I just don't do it as a living, And I'm really interested in psychology. I've been studying myself since I don't know, maybe middle school, high school, specifically because my within my family there's been like elders who have attended AA meetings. And so it's been really interesting because they, you find that AA are really great spaces to be introspective about yourself and your emotions. And so, yeah, that's how I got really interested in the world of psychology. And I wanted to talk about normalizing things in relationships because I am in one at the moment, and it has been illuminating um, how much media has shaped the way that I see love and the way I see that I think things are supposed to go when you're partnered up. And so a lot of the talk is going to be based on a post that was actually made by I Am in Power on Instagram for those of you watching. And so, sorry, it's called, there you go. Or like the
Trying to see if it'll come up.
The things to normalize relationships. Yeah. And that was on December 9th, 2020. So the first one is adjusting or adding boundaries. I guess I can say, like, in my experience, because I didn't know how love, what it was like being with someone who was willing to listen to my needs, just stuck in a pattern of like being with people who weren't available for that. Now being in something, in a relationship with someone who is.
Hi, this is Editing Paradise. I noticed that when I was making this video with Brianna, I noted that I was not with people who were available to listen to my needs, but I forgot to mention that I also wasn't available to listen to other people's needs. And I think that that's super important to take responsibility for our part of the relationship. And yeah, to kind of be real about that. So whenever I do mention that, just know that I've come to really accept that in the past few months. And I wanted to respect my past partners in that way by relaying that. Thanks.
I've come to find that one, I do need boundaries and it's important to say them because, like, what are those, right? And then two, not feeling like I'm asking for too much because this specific slide says adjusting or adding, which I think is really cool because it's not just a one time. I'm going to tell you that, like, I don't know, like, for example, I need a lot of space. And so needing to say that, one is like defies Hollywood's expectation of like, I should always want to be with you,
24/7.
20.
If I'm really in love, I can't get enough of you.
Yeah. And so that's just one example, but also having to change that, like, okay, well, thank you, now you did meet my boundary, and now I am okay, and now I do want to be around you, and just kind of
Mhm.
adjusting, kind of teaching your partner, and as you learn yourself what you need. Um so I mean, what about you? What have you come to learn about boundaries and adjusting them and stuff?
Yeah, I resonated with a lot of what you said. I think that um, kind of like trying not to go on a tangent and being full circle. You mentioned that like something that kind of drew you to think of me and say like, oh, let's be in conversation was kind of this wanting to center advocacy and like shining light on like marginalized identities and how that stuff shows up. So being socialized as a Latina, um, we're kind of normalized to like, you know, feed everybody before ourselves, right? Wash the dishes before you, right? There's all these things where we are the subservient, and part of that we love, we adopt, and it becomes our love language. And then part of it, for some, might feel oppressive and like, wait a minute. But I think that piece of my culture kind of goes like, your needs, boundaries, like what? What are those? And so growing up with brothers, I've got an older brother and a younger brother, and it was like clear cut night and day how differently we were socialized and trained. And so there were things that I was like, this doesn't feel equitable to
Like,
me. Why is there why is there a double standard? And so like for me personally, I've always known I need a lot of space because my emotions get really big really quick, and I need time to like simmer down,
yeah.
because if I'm around people before I've simmered, I'm very reactive, and it's not healthy. It's, some of the toxic traits that I've learned and I'm trying to unlearn. And so there was a lot of like, wait a minute, what? Like every movie you see, every like romantic portrayal, or like, social media, Instagram, like people are just like smitten with each other. There's physical proximity, there's constant I'm thinking about you and texting you. And it's like, well, man, I must not love my partner if I want my own space. Mm-hmm. And so doing a lot of unlearning and relearning, unpacking about what are my needs, what are your needs, and when I'm having a need of space, making sure that that's not misinterpreted or communicated as I'm rejecting of you. Because in fact, I want us to work out. I want us to last. I want this marriage to work. I want us to live together, cohabitate successfully. And because of that, because I'm in this for the long haul, I need to be respecting of my needs in the immediate, in the now. And it's been really cool also watching my partner get to recognize like, oh, I'm allowed to have needs too, because he's socialized of like, oh, I'm supposed to cater to you. And, this language of like, if you're, mad, I have to revolve around that. And it's like, no, I'm responsible for my feelings. You don't have to carry that for me. So I think that's the kind of adjusting of boundaries. It's not stagnant. It does shift. So it's interesting, especially in pandemic times where we're spending more time at home to watch that unfold.
For real.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't ask you your pronouns.
Thank you. It's
her.
She, her. Ditto.
Okay, cool.
Although I don't mind they, them, just for the sake of like normalizing folks to like non-binary stuff.
Yeah, just to use it. People get like used to hearing it. I feel like.
Yeah. And not the whole like, that's grammatically incorrect and
Oh, bro, we use it all the time, chill.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to make sure. Okay. So we kind of covered the needing alone time, which is funny. That was one of the last ones.
So the third one is having different sex drives.
Which is really funny because like sex is taboo, and like I even feel a little bit strange talking about it, even if I'm very like, I don't care,
Yeah.
But I think that for me, sex is so interesting in that before, dating people that weren't really available emotionally and were only available sexually, that was something that, was no problem with other people because that's the way that we related. And I personally have found that it was so much easier to relate in that way, because it wasn't it didn't require that I be vulnerable, and coming into this relationship with my partner now, I'm like, it's even harder for me to be sexual because it's like, okay, well, when we talk and we're intimate, I desire you even more. And so
Yep.
to get to that place, I have to tell you what I'm feeling, and I don't want to do that.
Yes. Yes. I'm trying to think if it's like, I don't know if it's Brene Brown or Gottman, because it's the end of the day, my brain's going, woo, like factoid wise.
Yeah.
But no, absolutely. There's definitely like this dance that we do of like, okay, I crave, like people who are like very attachment theory or like, yeah, Brene Brown, Gottman, they're very like, all humans just want to be connected. We want to be in relation to one another. And so that doesn't necessarily just mean sexually, right? That can be with our peers, with our colleagues, with our community. But we're seeking connection. We're a social species, right? And that's like a very marriage and family therapist thing too. We're very like, we exist within structures and like, like we don't exist in vacuums and whatever. And so we might say, I have some shame or I have some anxiety, some distress when it comes to emotions and vulnerability, because maybe growing up it wasn't safe for me to be vulnerable. Maybe I had to be like ready and protected because I was hurt so much, whether that was physically, emotionally, sexually, whatever it may be. And so we kind of learn, oh, okay, emotions or vulnerability like that gets tucked away, that's guarded. And then it kind of like backfires because we crave this connection, but we can't have that connection and that intimacy without vulnerability. Like if there's no skin in the game, if there's nothing to lose, right? Like me saying, hey, to a stranger, like there's no skin in the game for that. If they say no, like, yeah, whatever, I just said, hey, good morning. But to turn to somebody who I care deeply about and who I hope cares deeply about me and say, like, I am so afraid of letting you down, and not being the partner that you've dreamed of. And there being the potential for them being like, yeah, you did let me down, right? This like, oh, we avoid. And then we further disconnect ourselves.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, how do we go at our pace and find the balance of, let me share with you and know that rejection is always a possibility. They might not receive my bid for let's connect and let's be intimate. And I'm thinking like, in the example that you described before that, like, okay, like maybe like hookup culture was like not a vulnerable space. It wasn't scary. It was like, yes, like we're on the same page. Let's do this. And that's why it's so easy. That was so easy for you in that space. And I'm thinking about a specific client who's talked about the exact opposite. Like, I can talk about feelings all day long, but the thought of me being without clothes, like, oh, shame city, right?
Yeah.
And so it's those ideas of like, I am taking off my armor, my protectiveness with my feelings or my body or whatever it is that you're vulnerable about, hoping that you won't reject me, that you'll meet me where I'm at, and that we can connect and be intimate together, whether that's talking or hooking up. And then it doesn't always work out that way. And so in Gottman or EFT stuff, they'll call it like an attachment injury, where I'm trying to connect and I'm trying to attach with you. And as I'm leaning in, right, the trust fall, you drop me. And so now I can't do that with you anymore because I'm anticipating you're going to drop me. And then we never move past it. Trying not to go on a tangent. So you were saying how previously it was easier, but now we're in this place of like, for my sex drive to activate, I want to connect and be intimate with you in this space first.
Yeah.
But it being weird.
Yeah. It being like, oh, I have to tell you that, I don't know, whatever anxieties that I'm going through. And we all have our you know, we all have the things that make us want to have sex with someone, you know, whether it's the way they dress or the way that they seduce you, whatever, you know, like different kinds of things. Everybody's into different things. For example, we all think guys are supposed to want to. And I've met guys that are like, you know, like, I want to more than them, you know, and they even told me like, oh, I've experienced women wanting to like more than me, you know, if that makes
yeah, no, totally. And I love that you touched on that, because I think, you know, part of your theme here is like normalizing things that should be normalized in relationships, and absolutely like breaking down that stigma of sex drives are gendered, and that people who are mask presenting or males are supposed to have a higher one, or vice versa. Or like, you know, that females with a high sex drive fall into this certain stereotype. And it's like, the truth is it's complex, and everyone, like you said, everyone's got their own turn on. Certain things need certain needs, because I think the memes have buttons where there's like an on and off switch for one person with a high sex drive. It's either on and off, and then for other people there's like all these dials and knobs and stuff you have to, like, almost disarming a bomb status. But no, it's not some puzzle. It's just we have needs, and I think the more we can like I don't know what the word is, untaboo it and normalize, like, it's okay to say, hey, I need more foreplay before we even think about this, right? Like, I need you to tell me about your day at work before. Some people are like, the last thing I want to think about is my day at work. Okay, well, what's another way I can connect with you and know that you're confiding in me about things other than just, you know, physical intimacy? Or I need to know that, you know, if I bring up trying something that's new or exotic or different, or incorporate like a theme or toys or something, that you're not going to think of me differently. It's constantly a negotiation of the boundaries, right? Somebody might say, hey, yeah, actually, I need this kind of toy to be incorporated. And partner B might say, actually, that violates my boundary. And so having a discussion about, like, how do we go about meeting needs? Is there compromise? Is this not going to work out? And yeah, I think that what you talked about even before we started this conversation, about how even though it's like no more taboo and, like, you know, demystifying things, there's even still that ingrained piece of like, do we talk about this? And you're a part of the change right now in this conversation. So I just wanted to kudos to that.
Yeah. Thank you. So the next thing is making these mistakes and holding each other accountable. And do you want to talk about that before I like say anything?
Let me ask you, if you have ever made a mistake, are you the kind of person, like, not the kind of person, but do you respond best to somebody calling it out in that moment? Like, I'm thinking of, for me, if I mess up a pronoun, like, I don't want that to just go unaddressed. I function more successfully if somebody goes, it's they, and I'm like, oh yeah, in the moment corrections, versus like a week has gone by and then somebody brings it up. I'm like, oh.
Ooh, damn. Because I'm very defensive because of trauma. Like, oh, if I do something wrong, that makes me bad. Like, you know, stuff like that. Like, but then at the same time, it hurts me so much when someone doesn't tell me what's wrong. So I'm like, you can tell me. Like, I'd rather you talk to me, you know? So I don't know. And I'm gonna keep thinking about that, because I do know that I have to make it easier for people to be honest with me in my life. And to know that it's safe to do so. And yet I don't know if I'm there.
Yeah. And I think you're tapping into some needs about, like, I need to feel safe, right? When we're safe, we don't feel defensive. If we feel like someone, which happens all the time, both like in my sessions and in my real life, my partner might say, like, hey, my need was violated. And I might trigger going to, like, you're calling me a bad partner, you're saying I failed you, right? Or like, I'm this like terrible person, and slowing that down, and doing some unlearning and relearning about actually they're just advocating for their needs and their boundaries, which deserves to be met just like mine. But again, when we're in that space of defensiveness, especially if it's ingrained from trauma, it takes a while before we can like and receive that bid for their need, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that in other times when I've caught myself being defensive, I'm not always like 100% by any means, but like I need some space to process and cool down, but your need is important to me, right? And so it's not necessarily taking full accountability in that moment, because you're usually not able to when you're up here.
Yeah.
But letting your partner know, like, messages received, like complaint received, filed, processing, and when I'm regulated, I want to try and address this. But I think that's really powerful that you know that about yourself, of like, I want to be that safe space. I want to be able to hear people out and correct and move forward, but I'm also very aware that this is a trigger for me too.
Yeah.
So
wishing
you.
Go ahead. No.
I was going to say, wishing you love and luck on that journey, because it is a journey, but you can do it.
Yeah, thank you. And I feel like I am getting a lot better, which is really cool. And I love that you talked about like what they call flooding, you know, basically for those who don't know, it's flooding is when, you know, we're triggered, something, you know, affects our emotional response or reaction. And I'm guessing it's like cortisol being rushed to the brain,
yep.
right? The stress hormone. And so you can't think, and it's like, you know, you feel like blood rushing to your arms and everything like that. Your heartbeat is accelerated and everything like that, you know?
Yeah.
And I love
Can I nerd out with you?
Yeah, go ahead.
So what you're describing is literally the fight, flight, or freeze response. And so a lot of us who've experienced early childhood traumas and stuff like that, like you mentioned, there's a chemical in your brain that releases into your blood called cortisol, and that's what triggers your actual body to go into either fight, flight, or freeze. Hence why we say defensiveness, because some of us are ready for like attack, or some of us go into a bunch of like self like loathing and self-pity and negative self-talk about like, I'm so stupid, like I should have gotten this already, because, you know, we're more of like the freezers. And so the way to actually shut that off, because it's a physiological thing happening in your body, which is why your heart might beat faster, your breath might get more shallow, you might have to pee or get really gassy because your body's ready to release the stuff it doesn't need. It sounds super cheesy, but yeah, like slowing down, taking super slow deep breaths in, long breaths out, shuts off that automatic nervous system stuff going on inside you, so that you can think clearly. When you're in survival mode, you're not being rational, you're saying, where's my safety, how do I survive this and get out of this? So
I love that. Thank you for going in depth about that.
Totally.
Yeah, like I've come to see it and notice that it's all I need sometimes. And even still, it's hard to allow myself that need. And like, you're not weird. Like, this is science.
Yep.
You know?
Especially though, because you said you identify as like a nurturer, a caregiver. It's a very bizarre place to say, like, wait a minute, how come I'm not okay and in a position to take care of somebody else? How come I'm, you know, defensive and like I'm having my own emotional process right now? Like, this is what? Yeah. But it doesn't say anything less of you as a caregiver or a nurturer to have your own needs.
Yeah. And I think the way that you mentioned, you know, that you need that time to like calm down or suggest that we do that. I think that's what it is, you know, and I do find that like, hey, I hear you, but I just need time. And it's really cool because I found that some days me and my partner aren't really good at it, you know, like if it's something we've never ever talked about before, you know, or maybe it's really triggering us both. And so like neither of us say like, hey, I need space. We'll just like walk around each other and then like, wait, like we're totally stonewalling each other. Like, it's not cool. Like, it's not going to be beneficial to the long term, you know.
And I love that you use that phrase, stonewalling, because we see that often in media of like, you betrayed me or you hurt me or invalidated me. So that's it. I'm screening your calls, right? Dead to me, like, go find myself, and then expect to come home to partner like waiting and like sulking and like, my life was so done without you. And it's not always like that, right? Like, people are allowed to be upset about you disappearing and ghosting and stonewalling, and it's actually really not healthy. But if we're in communication about our needs of, hey, right now I am so just over the top angry and it's not your job to take care of me, it's my job, and to take care of me I need like a week, or I need the next day or 30 minutes. It's huge to table things when we're flooded, right? But knowing and kind of agreeing that we're going to revisit this and resolve it when we're both in a space where we can be productive and fighting for the goal that is like us, or being civil and working this out, even if that means we go our separate ways. Because imagine as a child, right? If your mom's flooded and then she's like, bye, and disappears for a week, as a child, you're like, well, I'm going to starve to death, right? And it's kind of like the same but different in partnerships. If somebody just ghosts you, even if you're not an anxious person, you're going to be left with like, so are we done? Are we not?
Yeah.
But if we can be clear about, I need some time to find that. What is that, more or less? And what's the expectation when we reconvene?
I love accurate. I love that we just keep addressing like one of the, at least for me, is like the biggest guy in like the relational world of psychology, which is Gottman. Basically, I'm sure people watching either know about Gottman or like,
if they don't, now they do.
Yeah, and this specific slide, which I'm gonna read it again, making mistakes and holding each other accountable, really reminded me of one of the, what he calls the four horsemen, right? Yeah, and which is criticism. And it reminds me of something that actually happened recently between me and my partner, and it was a mistake on one of our parts, and I really wanted to go into, within the conversation, I really wanted to go into criticism without realizing it,
Remember, fight, flight, response. Yeah. We're ready.
We're like, I can't think straight, right?
And bring it.
Yeah, exactly. And it wasn't until after I told them my needs in a very like angry way, that I realized that I wasn't telling them, hey, I feel like you made, when you did this, I felt this, and in a way, what I thought I was holding them accountable by being like, hey, I felt, I didn't say I felt, I said, you were doing this.
Exactly.
And that's unfair because, and yada, yada, yada. And obviously my very aggressive body language, which happens a lot, which I'm definitely working on. And then later on, like after we talked about it, I had to say like, hey, like, I'm so sorry. Like after everything went down,
yep.
After all that freaking cortisol went down, I was like, hold on. Like, yes, there are things that need to be, acknowledged. There were things that hurt me, but then I had to say, hey, I felt this when you did this, or I felt this way when you did this, and not so much, what Gottman says is like the criticism of like, you always do this, and like, I'm attacking your character now.
Yes. Like, you never, you always, why can't you just, right? And that's huge. And that kind of ties into what we were talking about with like, the vulnerability, like for a lot of folks, myself included, especially again, when you come from that trauma background, it's so scary to be vulnerable and honest and raw with our feelings, because we might have learned they don't matter, or they're not as important as this other thing, and it's just invalidation, attachment injury, And so oftentimes the easy thing to do is criticize, because if I can lash out at you and make you the bad guy, we're hoping that they'll go, oh, I'm so sorry, I did that, you're so right, I was so wrong. But people don't respond to criticism that way unless they're like really like intensely people pleasy, which again, that's not super healthy either, right? And so I love, like, can't say it enough, I love I statements. Whether when you're in relation to anyone, like anyone, it could be the person who cut you off in traffic, although you're probably not going to have a conversation with them, or your intimate partner, just anyone you're in relation to. But oftentimes when you say an I statement, even if it's not delivered to a partner, when you talk yourself through an I statement, you discover what it was that you needed and how to go about validating that. So like the template for it, it kind of varies. I don't know if this is specifically a Gottman thing, but it's like all therapists use I statements at some point. But the template is I feel or I felt when you, and so the feeling word is always just one specific emotion. It's not like, I feel like you don't care about me. It's I feel unloved. I feel overlooked. I feel neglected. I feel embarrassed. I feel angry. I feel shame. One word. When you, and you have to be very specific about like an observable thing. So you can't feel like when you act like, you know, you're the only person that matters, because that's an opinion.
What did they,
yeah.
How did they do that? Yeah.
Exactly. So I might say like, I feel unloved when I don't receive a text from you at some point in the day, because my idea of being loved is somebody checking in with me, just because, like, not necessarily having a, I need you to fill up the gas tank, just because. So what I need to feel secure in this relationship, to feel loved, is like a check, hey, how's it going? How's your day? Or thinking of you, like anything, just acknowledge that I'm there, right? And these are hard. These are not easy. Like, it took me a long time, and I was like, nobody talks like that. Like, who has time? Like, this is some white people stuff. But like, when you sit down and you do the work and you're like, I have feelings, I'm allowed to feel something about their behavior, and I'm realizing their behavior isn't necessarily indicative of how they feel about me. That's just their norm, their routine. And they don't necessarily know all of my needs, no matter how long we've been together. I might have new needs. My needs might change. So me being able to recognize my own needs and advocate and say, I need this, right? I need foreplay before sex. I need a check, like once a day, not every day, but you know, some point throughout the week. I need for you to make dinner for me sometimes, like whatever it might be. And this is where it's like vulnerable and their skin in the game. Our partners can always say no. They can always say, I can't meet that need. That's not something that I can do, right? Maybe in their job, their phone is in a locker somewhere, so they literally can't do it. Who knows? But being in conversation opens up doorways for us to say, like, it's not that I don't want to, but I literally can't. But I'm wanting to meet your need in other ways. What about this? Or like, what are some other needs you have? Since you like Gottman, I want to plug this in case you don't already know about it. There's this really cool, it's mostly for romantic couples, but you could probably just get creative about it if you wanted to just use it on your own. There's an app. Do you know about the Love Nudge?
I don't think I do. Is it their app?
It's not by Gottman, but it uses, it's like both partners they download the app, they make a little profile, and they take a little quiz, and it tells you like your dominant love languages, like if you're mostly touch, or if you're mostly like words of affirmation, or like receiving gifts. And so like there's like the 5 like major ones or whatever, and it tells you like how much of which you are. And so like for me, whereas I'm not a big touch person, that's not how I receive love the strongest, so I naturally don't give it that way often. You can put little reminders of like, don't forget, like to do one of these. You can set it for like once a week, once a month, once a day, whatever. And it's not meant to be like a for life thing. It's to help you kind of develop an awareness and like incorporate into your routine, and then you don't needed anymore. But it's cute. And I think that people who struggle with asking for their needs, this could be like a helpful start. I just get concerned that people rely solely on this and they will never ask for their needs because they're like, you're not even looking at the app. Da, 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 da. So it's mostly like a thing you're supposed to use in juncture with like being in couples therapy, but you could try it out. I think it's cute.
I like that. That's cute. I'm gonna check it out. I've like tried some apps. I don't know the names of them, but I'm gonna see if I've tried that because I love little apps like that. They're cute.
Yeah. And so you could like you can send like a little message to your partner about like, I'm not feeling like totally loved or something, and then your partner can get like a little notification of like, oh, like share quality time or like a word of affirmation or whatever that's like a dominant love language for your partner. And it just again can help, supposed to help bring awareness and help you incorporate it into like your routine.
Oh, that's cool. I'm gonna check that out. So I think we kind of talked about like I don't think we did. What do you would you say we talked about having respectful disagreements? Semi, not really.
Yeah, I think you can kind of pull from like the example that you gave, but if you want to get more specific, we can. So you were kind of sharing about how like if you do get feedback, that can be triggering, and like that can be considered a disagreement, right? Where a partner, like I mentioned, is like, I have this need that wasn't met, or I have this boundary that was crossed or violated, and we might disagree and say like, why are you coming at me like that when I was just trying to da 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 da. And so you talked about like de-escalating, not being flooded, taking your space, cooling down, tabling before we come back and resolve. But there's going to be some things that we just don't see eye to eye on, right? And I think that Hollywood tells us like, oh, well then it's just not meant to be, right? If it's a deal breaker, then bye. Doesn't matter if they've met all these other needs. He's not Mr. Right. They're not Mr. Right. They're not the one. And I'm not encouraging people to settle for less than they deserve because everyone has their needs. But I think that normalizing that it's not all the fantasy of we're going to be totally 100% on like everything. There's going to be things we disagree on, and it doesn't mean you're rejected or unloved. And having those kind of I statements in navigating those disagreements can be really helpful because it allows you and them an opportunity to say like, this is my feeling, this is why, this is what I need, and then that partner can say I can or cannot meet that need, right? Or I am not going to see it that way, or what have you.
Yeah. I have for this one, I have more of a question, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you touched on how, Hollywood makes us believe that we have to agree on pretty much everything. Like they have to finish my sentence. Like
yeah,
they have to know when I need my leg rubbed. Like they have to know when I go like this, it means this. Like
Mm-hmm.
And so we think that they're supposed to basically think, exactly the way that we think, and then
their brain is an extension of ours.
Yeah.
If you're not on the same brainwave, it's not a real connection.
Yeah, exactly. The wave thing, like, nah, like you're supposed to know where I'm at, and we're always supposed to be at the same level,
Yeah.
And I guess, I'm really curious how you've experienced or navigated, like, being someone who is such a strong advocate for other people and social change, And so, have you felt like you've had to navigate even like machismo, which is like a big thing, like, do you ever feel like from what you hear from other people, it's like, oh, like, kind of like your man is supposed to be perfect, like, as the ideal social, like, socially woke, conscious couple, you're both supposed to be like never making mistakes and blah blah blah, So I'm really curious, like, how you've felt with any of that,
Yeah, I think that I like that you touched on machismo, because I think myself, like I was steeped in that because of growing up with brothers. I was like, oh, I need to internalize and become this, right? I don't cry, I don't have feelings, I'm not like other girls, right?
Yeah.
To try and, what is it? Using that proximity to masculinity to save me. Um, and so I can literally look back, probably, I don't even know if it's still a thing, like MySpace and Facebook, when you don't use them, I don't know if they erase them or not, but I'm sure that I've posted like problematic stuff, and I can look back and be like, wow, I used to think that way. That's nuts, right? And so using that knowledge of like, we all start somewhere, we all have a journey, and not like trying to bury or erase that, but growing from it and using it as an example of like, I was never perfect, I will never be perfect, but that's where I was, here's where I am, still got plenty to go. So my partner and I don't think we've ever been even remotely on the same, not to do like a this thing, but I think our paths have just been very different when it comes to social justice. And there came a point where I was like, whoa, like, can I even be partnered with somebody who like doesn't identify as like a intersectional feminist? Like, isn't that contrary to like what am I a hypocrite? And so I think where I am now is, again, just recognizing that everybody's like in their own space. And it's actually been really cool to hear him in his friend circles like, I'm sorry, what did you say? Like, what did you mean by that? Like when somebody, oh, that was so gay or something. And he's like, I don't think that's what you think that means, bro. And I'm like,
I love that. Totally, yes.
And so like a little piece of me is like, I did that. But it's like, no, because has he been exposed to it and like socialized to alternative, ways of thinking, alternative to like machismo stuff? Sure. But am I there being like, here's, intersectional feminism 101? Like, absolutely not. But we have been in conversations about like, this is what's important to me. This is why these things bother me and why I don't see it as overreacting, but like basic human decency. And yeah, just watching him put into action has been like pretty cool, even though it's not necessarily like he might not be doing it in the same ways that I'm doing it. I'm like, all right, this is where you are in your journey. What's your experience been like, if you don't mind me asking?
No. I've definitely had that moment where I'm like, am I supposed to be with him? Like, and it's funny because it's happened to me with being in two different like communities. So it's happened to me where I've judged him for his beliefs, his whatever he said and stuff like that. Things that he just wouldn't know not to say. Like maybe he would in some way, but like I have the privilege that I went to, to university. I went far away. I met people that I wouldn't have met if I had stayed in San Diego. And so that kind of like helps me see it and has helped me see it. That's like, hey, bro, like it's just like when you come home from college and you start talking about all these things and like people have no freaking clue. They're like, chill.
Yeah, no, for real.
Yeah,
like I definitely think that you're hitting something super important about privilege, in the sense that our identities might be marginalized in various capacities, but even having access to higher education, having access to learning that this way of speaking or thinking was problematic, right? That's something that a lot of our community members are like, it's problematic. Like, what are you even talking about, right? Like, oh, you think you're so cool now because you went to college.
Yeah.
And so like balancing that of like, how do I stay true to this advocacy work that I'm passionate about doing without like toying around this privilege and being in judgment of others who are from, whether it's because of class, like economic stuff that they weren't able to access it, or having to work and not having the opportunity to go away. So yeah, that's super important. But you were saying that you caught yourself judging him and then recognizing I got this experience, and then
yeah, And then just slowly seeing that he wanted to hear me out. He wanted to understand why I believe the way that the things that I believe. And kind of saw it as I've seen him change like his way of thinking, and obviously he's his own person, so
right,
we don't think exactly the same.
yeah,
But I love that I've been able to communicate my needs and say, like, hey, I don't like when you make these jokes. And I used to feel bad about it, but it's because
yeah,
I don't know, like it's hard not to feel like, oh, like maybe I just can't, not that I can't take jokes, but
for
like,
sure,
are we gonna
for
be
sure.
able to joke about anything?
For sure. My partner's very like comedy and humor is his thing. Like him and his friends are all bonded by that, right?
Yeah.
And I remember there was a time where it was like not an explicitly said thing, but when they would joke, like it was meant to be funny that they're being like romantic or like hitting on each other. And I'm like, I can't quite put it into words. This was years ago. Like I can't quite put it into words, but I'm having a reaction to this, right?
Yeah.
And what you talked about, staying out of criticism, right? Because the four horsemen and whatever.
Yeah.
And so not saying like you suck for doing this, but letting him know like I feel some type of way, like can't put my finger on it. I feel uncomfortable. I feel uneasy when you guys make these jokes, which later on came to an understanding of, because at any moment, whether you're actually queer or not, you have this like passing privilege, where you won't ever be the victim of a hate crime for jokingly kissing your guy friend or whatever. And so I need us to be cognizant that there's people whose lives are in jeopardy, simply for existing and loving, like in public, right? And so I'm needing us to not use their existence as like a punchline, and that not being a criticism of you and you being a terrible person and shame on you, but letting them know about like my reaction, why I feel that way, where that's coming from. And of course, like you said, they're their own people. They get to make their own choices. They can absolutely say, well, I think it's funny, so sorry, But fortunately, my partner is the kind of person that goes, you know what, putting into perspective like that, that's not something that's funny to me. So stop being a thing. So it's cool to hear that you've been cognizant of like also where it's not totally gelling, and then rather than being like I need to change this person, just speaking truth to your experience, and advocacy is a part of your identity, and it's gonna shape and inform your boundaries and why you have reactions to things or don't, and then they can choose to rise to the occasion or not.
Yeah, I was gonna say that like it can be that like, hey, like we just don't blend well together, and having to go your separate ways. And if that happens for someone,
Yeah,
you know that that's okay.
Yeah.
So how about we end on this slide that says experiencing doubts. Do you want to start? Do you want me to?
I'm gonna let you start so I can marinate.
Yeah, this is actually like the slide that I think I can speak mostly about. From what I've read, people with an avoidant attachment, they sometimes have these beliefs according to whatever they're experiencing, maybe fears or etc. They have this feeling that tells them that like I want to go away from my partner. And then it finds little things to nitpick, you know? And so these little things to nitpick become something reasonable to end up leaving because, trauma taught me that it's safer to go away from someone. So that was revolutionary for me. And that changed the trajectory of my relationship and the way that I saw relationships. Because as I said, I dated people who wouldn't show up, who I had to chase, who I had to like make be in this relationship, which I,
Right.
And so finding someone who wanted from the beginning to be with me, it's like, kill me.
What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, this is
Yeah.
uncomfortable, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so doubt was something, and still to this day is something that I've had to maneuver because of, you know, what I've found can be, um, you know, which is rarely talked about. What is it? Relationship OCD, which is like a, you know, a variation of OCD, just kind of like harm OCD, which you think that I ran someone over on the road, I must go back, I have to go check, and you know, you're like ruminating, and the same thing happens with relationship OCD, which is like, oh, like I didn't like that kiss, that must mean I don't love him, you know, like little things like that. So these kind of things that address doubt made me realize that attachment and trauma, like, was making me flee a situation
Yep.
where this person is available,
Mm-hmm.
and that scares the shit out of me.
Yep.
You know. um
Yep.
so yeah, I think that that is something, if anything out of these, that would be the thing that I would definitely speak on and say, like, we don't address any of these kinds of thoughts because
Mm-hmm.
maybe of your history, or you know, things like that.
Yep. Yep. And that's one of the things, like, obviously I love being a therapist. I love my field, and part of being an advocate is addressing why it's freaking not accessible to like the general public, right? If you have to pay 104, I think the average is like $140 for a session. Like my cousins can't afford that stuff. You know
I
what I mean?
can't, like,
Exactly. I've never paid that much, even as a therapist. I've been like, who's got the sliding scale fees? Where are the clinics that I can, right?
yeah.
Student discount.
Mhm.
And so, like, yeah, I'm just like, in the fact that our high schools didn't even offer psychology, or middle schools or whatever. Why are we not having emotional literacy classes? I know I took a media literacy class because at my high school, dissecting like Photoshop and like advertisement not being real was an important thing at the time. I think it still is. But I'm like, why aren't we being taught about like why we think the way we think and why we feel the way we feel? And like, oh yeah, because trauma is normalized in our communities and we're underfunded. Anyways,
I love that you're
yeah.
like
Shameless rant. But no, absolutely. I think I shared with you that even as a marriage and family therapist, my work has been predominantly in youth and families. And so it's super common when we're working with foster youth, or kids who have been adopted, that the parents are like, what? Like, I don't get it. Like, they came from this abusive household. Like, here, like, we don't yell, we don't physically discipline. Like, they have their own room. Right? Like, all their basic needs being met, and they're still having these behaviors. And we're having to talk and educate them on attachment styles, and how it's way more soothing to our psyche to say, I'm going to leave you first, or I'm going to drive you to send me back into foster care so that I don't have to deal with the rejection of me not being enough for you.
yeah.
Right? And that's just one example. So as adults being coupled, depending on our attachment style, it's absolutely, we love this illusion of control, of like, I can navigate this, I'm going to beat you to the punch so you don't get me, right? And again, it goes back to like, if we're raised in a space where our feelings aren't validated, and it's actually going to cost us our safety to ask for needs and show vulnerability. We learn that it's a weakness because we've been preyed upon when we've been vulnerable or something like that. It's that much harder to say like, wow, here's a person who loves me, who still might not work out for me. And I don't know that I deserve love, and I don't know that I deserve your attention. So like, I'm going to say, I'm going to apologize you and say there's something wrong with you, because the rest of them, I had to chase them, right? And I remember the first time I heard like self-love journey, I was like, again, like, nobody talks like that. But really, because where we come from, right, that might not have been prioritized. So I think that probably the happiest that I've ever been is when both my partner and I were both seeing our own therapist, not in couples therapy. They're doing their own work, I'm doing my own work. Not because I remember for years I was like, go to therapy, and then I like gave up on that. And then they randomly started going to therapy, and they're coming home like, did you know that when I did this, and I'm like, I have some ideas, but who am I? It's not like I got a degree in this. But yeah, it's being able to recognize like, ooh, all of these fights, all of these nitpickings, all of these patterns, like that was self-sabotaging 101 because I did not want you to be the first one to, right? It's real.
Yeah, I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I love that I could like say that and like have that kind of reiterated, because a lot of the times you tell this to people and they're like, ¿qué? Ah, mija, ¿por qué no me dejas?
Yep.
Like,
yeah.
Like, so, and I've had those reactions, but then I have also had other people like married and telling me like, oh girl, I feel you, like,
mm-hmm.
So
your feelings, your experience is super valid.
Yeah. And so it's really cool. It's really cool to be able to have this space to be able to share with you, especially with your experience, and even like without it, but it is a part of you now. Like it's really cool to never have met you before, but have your presence online still affect my life. And I appreciate you so much, and I appreciate you wanting to do this with me today.
I am super appreciative of you as well. I was trying to explain to somebody, I was like, yeah, my friend from the internet, you don't understand. I don't even know exactly, I can't, how we met, but I know we follow like similar like activist page. So there's just like, it's gonna relax. But one of my like favorite takeaways from the SDSU MFT program is it's a very like, they use the phrase like postmodern to describe its approach, where for the most part, like almost your whole first year, like you're not sitting behind a desk, you're like sitting in a circle of like your 30 cohort mates, and like yes, there's lessons being taught, but you're really in a room full of people who at least have a framework, a similar understanding, have some similar assumptions about the world that you do, and you're just kind of all making meaning of things together, and like it's really like community oriented. And so I really appreciate your presence and you showing up authentically as you, and also opening up your experiences to whoever you share this with, right? And hoping maybe they find a sense of community and validation, and not feeling as othered or alone, because this stuff happens. It's real. And I'm wishing them luck in navigating it. I'm wishing us luck in navigating it, because we're still navigating it. Yeah. But yeah, thanks for inviting me. Thanks for meeting me, and thanks for being in conversation with me.
Thank you. Oh my God. Like I'm just so happy. You have no idea. And like you said, I really wanted to make this to have someone to talk about this with. And also, whoever is watching this, like, I'm really happy that you're here. I'm really happy, like, that you made it to this point. If you did make it to this point, like, thank you. And please share whatever ideas, comments, whatever, down below, as they say.
Links here, there, like, subscribe.
But yeah, and thank you so much, and I really appreciate it. And I just look forward to having other conversations.
Yeah, this will be the first of many.
Okay, well, I hope you have a good night, and then Happy New Year too.
You too. Take care, girly.
Okay, you too. Bye.